The opinions expressed in this show do not necessarily reflect the views of the Tampa Bay Arts and Education Network. The following program may contain strong language and is intended for mature audiences. Viewer discretion is advised.
Welcome to the Florida Tiger Bay Clubs Election Series 2020. This series is brought to you by a partnership of the Tiger Bay Clubs across the state of Florida. Partnering clubs include Central Florida, First Coast, Flagler, Gold Coast, Manatee, St. John, South County and Venice, Suncoast, Tampa, and Volusia County. And now, our host and moderator, Yvonne Fry, from the Tampa Tiger Bay Club.
Hello, and welcome to today's event. One of a series in a collaboration among Tiger Bay clubs across Florida presenting topics of statewide interest. Today is the third of our pre-election programs as we focus on Amendment 2, which proposes to raise the minimum wage over the next several years to $15 in our state. Tiger Bay clubs around the state share a common goal to educate and engage citizens on the pressing issues and political races affecting their communities. In this joint effort, we recognize the need to do the same at the statewide level. Thank you to each of the clubs for their work to bring these programs to audiences across Florida. I also want to recognize and thank our production partner, Tampa Bay Arts and Education Network, for their support. This event is being live streamed on Facebook, TV, radio, and websites across the state as organized by our participating Tiger Bay clubs. As we present the final event in our pre-election programming today, we also look ahead to Election Day on November 3rd. We'll hold a panel discussion on Thursday, November 12th, on the outcomes from the election, from the presidential race to state and local races, as well as what Florida voters decide on the amendments. Our confirmed panelists are Susan McManus, voting expert and USF Distinguished Professor Emerita, as well as Mark Caputa, Florida-based reporter for Politico covering the presidential race, and veteran Democratic operative Steve Shale, as well as Republican pollster Ryan Tyson. We encourage all of our viewers, no matter their affiliation or views, to vote if you have not already. This may be the most consequential election in our lifetimes, and we all need to make our voices heard. Now, on to today's program. Our discussion will be focused on the proposed Amendment 2, which would raise the minimum wage $1 each year until it reaches $15 in 2026. It would then be adjusted annually for inflation. The amendment needs 60% of the vote in order to pass. Proponents say it would help lift Floridians out of poverty at a time when those who are working minimum wage jobs need all the help they can get due to the economic effects of the pandemic. A recent Florida Policy Institute report says that a $15 minimum wage would increase wages for 2.5 million Floridians, which is over 25% of the workforce. It would also bring workers of all ages up to a living wage, benefiting Florida's service sector workers the most. And the report also said that it would reduce pay inequities, particularly experienced by women and people of color. However, opponents, who include the Florida Chamber of Commerce and many other business groups, are coordinating efforts to defeat the amendment through the group Amendment 2 Hurts You. They feel strongly this is a socialist policy that will mean fewer jobs, less opportunity, and higher costs for Floridians. As many small businesses struggle to survive during the pandemic, they feel that this would be the final blow to many of the business owners and their employees and will negatively impact immigrants, youth, Black Americans, Hispanics, single mothers, and LGBTQ persons who play a critical role in Florida's tipped hospitality industry. They believe this raise won't translate to a real raise since the cost of goods and services, including childcare, will go up, which will leave working families footing higher bills for many things. The debate around Amendment 2 is strong, and we hope to bring some clarity today from those on the front lines of the battle for and against the proposed minimum wage hike. It's my pleasure to welcome and introduce our speakers, J.T. Corrales of Crabby Restaurant, representing Amendment 2 Hurts You, and as well as John Morgan of Morgan & Morgan on behalf of Florida for a Fair Wage. Hello and welcome to you both. I want to outline our event structure and ask for each of your consideration of our time limits. We're going to begin with an opening question, which you'll have 3 minutes to answer. You'll then have 2 minutes per answer on the subsequent questions. If one of you or your side is specifically mentioned in an answer, we'll have the option of a 30-second rebuttal. We want to get to as many questions from Tiger Bay members from around the state as possible, and also want to give each of you equal time for your responses. These limits are meant to make sure that you respectfully address questions from our members. I'm going to have a clock on my screen. I'll let you know if you've gone over your time. And again, thank you for your respect of this structure and our intentions for an informative, interesting, and educational program today. As I mentioned, in the Tiger Bay tradition, our questions come from members of our clubs. In this case, the 10 Tiger Bay clubs from around the state that are presenting these forums submitted questions from their members, and our question coordinators, Tampa Tiger Bay Club board members John Godwin, a Democrat, and Lee Lowry, a Republican, have prepared them for today. I'll open with the first question with a time limit of 3 minutes, and you can start with this first question of making your case to the voters for why Florida should or shouldn't pass Amendment 2. Let's start with Mr. Morgan first, if we would.
Okay.
Welcome.
Why they should?
Or shouldn't.
All right. Well, look, let me just put it all in perspective for us. First of all, we all know that this country is divided from all walks of life. The Bernie bros, the Trump voters, and everything in between. Underneath it, I believe, the anger emanates from income inequality. At $8.56 an hour, that is subhuman wages. It's impossible to pay your rent, pay child care, and have groceries. People are working like crazy, doing all the right things, and all the wrong things are happening. They drive from their job at the restaurant to a food bank to get free food. That shouldn't happen. In America, dignity should not be anything other than a God-given right. To put everything in perspective, before we begin the debate, remember this. In 1980, a ticket to Walt Disney World cost $7.50. The minimum wage was $3.25. Fast forward 30 years later, a ticket to Disney is $150 during the holidays, $125 when it's not peak season. And that doesn't count parking, $10 Cokes. And the minimum wage is now $8.56. Prices have gone like crazy. Everybody's worried about prices going up with the wages going up. They're going up anyway. The prices have gone from a ticket of $7.50 to $150 in 30 years, and the minimum wage has gone from $3.25 to $7.50. That's a disconnect. That's wrong. That's not right. And what Amendment 2 does is to try to lift the working poor out of poverty and reward them for a hard day's work.
Thank you. Welcome. We're glad you're with us today. Mr. Corrales, would you bring forward the opposite side on this of why we should not pass it?
Sure. Good morning to our viewers and Florida residents and potential voters. And I want to thank you to the Tiger Bay Club for hosting this virtual event today. Yvonne, thank you for moderating. And John, thank you for your time. Because my face is not on the side of half the buses traveling around Florida, I'd like to take a moment to let the viewers know a little bit about who I am. My name is JT Corrales. I am the Director of Business Development for the Crabby Bills Family Brands. We're located in Indian Rocks Beach, Florida, just outside of Tampa. Been there for 38 years now, and we still operate out of that business. I am the son of a Panamanian immigrant, and I've been in this industry for 20 years now in varying capacities. Over that time, I was a server and a bartender when I put myself through college, got my degree in finance from the University of South Florida, go Bulls. And I'm here today representing the Florida Restaurant Lodging Association. Amendment 2 hurts you, and just myself as a concerned citizen. You know, prior to the pandemic, we had 500 members of our team amongst our 7 brands in our area. And when we got shut down in March and April, in those 2 very critical months for tourism here in the state, that number essentially went down to 0. Fortunately, because of the leadership in this state and phase by phase, we've been able to kind of get back to a little bit of what we were. And I can tell you we're at about 65% of what we were doing before the pandemic. So, you know, we're fighting like hell, not to, you know, keep our heads above water, but just to kind of get back to the surface because we're still so far away from where we need to be. So I am looking forward to debating the merits of Amendment 2 today. I think that it's important to keep at the forefront of this conversation that we're still in the midst of this pandemic. We still got the scars to bear from what's happened, and we still have the uncertainty of what's coming. We don't know what the future holds for us. Even this time of the year in October, November, when it's typically slow for us, we've always been able to count on the snowbirds from Canada or tourism internationally, and we don't know when that's coming back. So now is not the time for this. A constitutional amendment is not the way. This will kill jobs. This will raise the cost of living. This will just overall change the way of life for the residents that call the Sunshine State home. So I'm very grateful for the opportunity to be here today, and I'm looking forward to having a spirited debate on why I oppose Amendment 2.
Thank you, and welcome to you as well. We appreciate both of you in your advocacy and leadership in our communities on this to make sure that voters understand your positions. Our first member question today is from Deborah Belanti, a Democrat with the Tampa Tiger Bay Club, and also Joe Saviak, a Republican with the Flagler Tiger Bay Club. Both ask about the timing of this with the pandemic. So we put their questions together and ask. Many agree that the minimum wage in Florida is too low and something must be done to lift families who are working full-time out of poverty. But is this the right time to institute this increase when so many small businesses are already hurting from the pandemic and its economic devastation? JT, you already mentioned on this. If you want to go ahead and elaborate a little bit further to start on this question for us.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great question. And I would say 100% it's the wrong time. There's still 770,000 jobs that are not going to come back. 15% of businesses have already closed and will not reopen. And I can tell you from our perspective, this is a dark time. This is very uncertain. We don't know what the future holds. We're already trying to figure out how we can reconfigure the way we do business to be able to survive this. So, and I think in the spirit of the debates last night, even between our two presidential candidates, that question was asked about a $15 minimum wage. Mm-hmm. And Joe Biden had mentioned that, we're already going to have to bail out these small businesses because of the difficulties that they're in. And in Trump, to his point, he said, Alabama is not Vermont and so on and so forth. So putting a blanket over the whole country, and in this case, with a constitutional amendment and putting a blanket over the whole state and treating Ocala like it's Miami with a constitutional amendment I don't believe it's a responsible way to go about wage increases. I'm not in opposition of sitting on the other side of the table with John Morgan or somebody who wants to advocate for more wages, but I don't think that this is the way, and I don't think this is the time. It will hurt jobs. It will hurt the people it is intended to help, and that's why I oppose it.
Okay, thank you. John.
Well, look, the reason we have to do it this way is the Florida legislature will not even look at this, will not even take one witness. It's the same was when I passed medical marijuana. Why did I have to do that? Because the Florida legislature won't do their job. Now, look, if they're going to make the boogeyman the pandemic, that dog won't hunt. And I'll tell you why. First of all, the pandemic's going to pass. We're going to have a vaccine. We're going to have new therapeutics. We know that. The first time this goes to $10 an hour is next November. If this pandemic hasn't passed by then, we're all in a much deeper world of hurt. So when you start using the pandemic as an excuse, there's excuses and objections. That's an excuse. Here's the simple fact about the restaurant business. And by the way, I own restaurants. I own tourist attractions. I own Marriott hotels. This is going to affect me personally way more than it's going to affect JT, who's an employee at Crabby Bills. But remember this, 80%, forget the pandemic, 80% of all restaurants go out of business in 4 years. 60% of all restaurants go out of business in year one. It's a bad business. It's a risky business. Now, listen, I like people taking chances and I like risk, but it's a risky business. And the truth is there's too many dang restaurants for too few people. We represent people from all over the state of Florida who have their wages stolen by their employers, tips, overtime, computing time. You know who the number one theft is from? Restaurant owners. These folks don't want to pay the minimum wage, much less a $10 an hour wage.
Thank you, John. JT, did you want to respond to that? He had mentioned how this would impact you.
Yeah, absolutely. Not all businesses have the benefit of having the bankroll that John Morgan has to be able to sit on cash reserves and wait out the end of this pandemic. And a lot of businesses leverage their way to stay afloat during this time. There are people who mortgage their homes to continue to pay the business because they know it's the only future that they have. So for John Morgan to say that, I would ask him, what would he say to somebody who had to mortgage their home to stay alive here? So yes, the pandemic may pass, but the scars from it are going to be with us for a while, and in particular financially for people who had to leverage their way to get to the point where it passes. And another thing that John just said is, yes, this is a very hard business. The margins are very slim, but we live here in the state of Florida where tourism is our chief economic driver. So we need to be able to cater to our tourists, which is the restaurant industry. So what he's trying to do, and it sounds like it just from what he just said, is he wants to put restaurants out of business because there are too many. What kind of message is that to pass to the hardworking business owners and the people in these businesses who work, people like family members who work in this business that have been here for years?
I'm going to keep us moving on this one. We're going to move on to our next question. This is from T. Wayne Bailey, an NPA from Volusia, Volusia Tiger Bay Club. He asked, the establishment of the minimum wage is generally understood to be a matter of legislative policy. What's the justification of placing this minimum wage formula in the Florida Constitution? John, would you start with this one?
Had no choice. The Florida let me ask anybody watching this, including JT. I want to hear JT's answer to this. What has the Florida legislature in the state of Florida ever done for you and your family? Nothing. They work for the Chamber of Commerce. I loved when you were talking about the Chamber of Commerce, who they were concerned about illegal immigrants and LGBT and people of color. The Chamber of Commerce is not worried about those people. The simple fact is this. We had to do it because the state won't do it, just like medical marijuana. To take it a step further, JT, just so you may not know this, the city of Miami Beach passed a minimum wage for that particular area. The state of Florida sued them and said, you can't do it. And they took that minimum wage away from down there in Miami Beach, not Ocala, Miami Beach. What you have is a group called the Chamber of Commerce who want to have slave wages. They want to pay people so little that they can't even afford, where people decide it's better not to work than to work. JT, do you have a problem with $10 an hour?
I'm sorry, go ahead. Say that again, John.
Do you have a problem with moving this to $10 an hour minimum wage?
I think if we sat down at a table and we talked constructively on how this would work.
What do you feel about that, $10 an hour?
I don't want to get into the minutia of what $10
Okay.
You're talking about.
Okay, well, that's too high. I guess 10's too high too. It's not minutia when it's not minutia when you're working and living in poverty.
John, we're talking about Amendment 2 today at 15, and this is a hypothetical conversation.
It starts at $10. I'm asking you a question. Do you have a problem with $10 an hour?
We can have this debate after the election, John. We're talking about
when
Amendment.
you don't answer a question,
I'm going to
I
interrupt.
think we know your answer.
I'm going to interrupt. JT, would you like to answer that original question? Do you need me to repeat it again?
Yes, please.
Okay, we strayed away a little bit. The establishment of the minimum wage is generally understood to be a matter of legislative policy. What's the justification of placing this minimum wage formula in the Florida Constitution? Obviously, you didn't pursue that, but what are your thoughts on that?
I can't speak for the Florida legislator. I do think that it could be that they didn't want to pass it because it was an irresponsible measure because they know the consequences that it would have here on the state. One of the things that I have an issue with, and I think that we all should, is to John's point about passing the medical marijuana amendment. Here's the second constitutional amendment that we're dealing with here in the state. And it concerns me that one person with the amount of money and the amount of power that John has can put something on a ballot that completely change the way our state is governed and the way our residents live. So that's where I take an issue specifically with John's approach to this. But I can come to you just as who I am and what I do and what I represent. And I can tell you here in this business, the way that we conduct business, the way that every restaurant conducts business, this will have a dramatic impact on jobs or the costs. So you can't sit around and you can't do nothing if this were to pass. People will either lose hours or prices are going to go up, which is bad for the consumer and it's bad for the people that are on our team.
Okay. John, any response on that?
I'm disappointed in JT. JT, This is the purest form of democracy. The people get to vote on yes or no, not these paid legislators who are owned and operated by lobbyists in the Chamber of Commerce. And we have to pass it by 60%. If you don't believe that the will of the people is the best form of democracy, you might want to go visit Panama where they don't have this type of democracy.
So, all right, we're going to keep moving. Our next question is from Tom Scherberger, a Democrat. He says, the amendment calls for a gradual increase in the minimum wage, giving businesses time to prepare. If businesses still find that unacceptable, what is the alternative to the current minimum wage law to help low-wage employees at this difficult time? JT, would you start with that one today?
Yeah, I love this question. And in the last debate with John Morgan and his strategist, Ben Polera, the same question was proposed to him, and he irresponsibly said the prices will not go up. And I can tell you from our business perspective, as I mentioned earlier, we have very slim margins in the restaurant business. And our two biggest costs are our cost of our goods and the cost of our labor. Respectively, they're about 35% each. So if this were to pass, the cost of our payroll would go up by 77%, essentially taking that 35% cost up to 62%, and our total all-in cost on just two line items to 97%, leaving in a 3% margin before you've paid a single utility bill, your mortgage, your rent, replace the dozens of forks that seem to go missing every single week. So you can't sit around and you can't do nothing. So this gradual increase, the concept that this is somehow going to not affect jobs or not affect the cost of living is baseless. So what are you going to have to do as a business owner? You're either going to have to change the way you do business, you're going to have to cut hours, you're going to have to cut jobs, or you're going to have to pass the cost off to the consumer. And that's going to happen in every service, every retail business that you participate that's local to the state of Florida. Prices will go up. So even if anybody's getting a raise, they're still going to cost more to go to the grocery store, to pick up the groceries, to pay their babysitters, to even warrant the idea of going to work. So I would say that it's a bad deal for the consumers, for the tourists, and for just the residents here in the state of Florida.
Thank you, John.
Well, we already know JT doesn't want it to go to $10 an hour. I don't know if he thinks $8.56 is too high. Is that okay, JT, $8.56?
You pay what it is, John.
So here's the real problem. First of all, if JT's only making 3% on his sales, he needs me to come over there and show him how to run a restaurant, because they're not making the kind of money I'm making. And maybe that's why he's worried. 3%, I've never heard of such a margin. But here's what will happen. Here's what is happening. And this is why this is a conservative idea. Right now, there are people in Florida who have to make the decision, should I work or not work? Should I go to work and make $8.57 an hour and not be able to pay for my rent and my childcare and my food? Or should I stay home and get government assistance and food stamps and childcare and medicine paid for by, ready, the taxpayers? So we have people sitting at home because it's better to not work than to work because the wage is so low. Who pays for that? The taxpayers pay for these businesses who don't fairly pay their employees. I don't know how JT even looks his employees in the eye when he's treating them this shoddily. When I raised my people's wages to $15 an hour a couple of years, you know what happened? I wasn't there. My HR told me, sobbing, crying. Why? It's life changing. They now finally have dignity. They don't have to go to the food bank and beg for food after leaving Crabby Joe's, where they work around food all day. It's obscene.
JT, please respond on that one.
I'm glad John is bringing up this point. You know, in his last debate, he mentioned, and today, he mentioned that he owns a couple of Florida attractions. So I thought to myself, somebody who's worth anywhere between $500 and $730 million, like, does John Morgan have half of Busch Gardens? I didn't know, right? So I went and I did my research, and he owns Wonderwood, which he has 2 locations, one in International Drive and one in Panama City Beach. So in my research, I saw that there was a job opening for an exhibit greeter at Panama City Beach location. So I gave them a call, and I was curious what the pay was to start. It's $10 an hour. So I guess my question for John Morgan today, and to the viewers out here who are listening, if it's the right thing to do, to your point, it's the moral thing to do, and you don't want to be making money off the backs of your people, why are you not paying $15 today?
I own the Panama City store with another guy. I have a partner who disagrees, who believes like you do. And so we're at loggerhead there. Where I do control 4,000 employees is at Morgan & Morgan. And that's where it's $15 an hour. In every business that I have majority control, are you the owner? But I don't know, the sole owner. I'm not the sole owner. So I have to live within my partnership, and we disagree vehemently. And they're very upset. My partners are very, very upset that I'm doing this. But here's the thing, JT, I've done the math, I've run the numbers, and guess what? We're going to be able to raise people's pay at WonderWorks. My partners are going to be upset about it, and we're going to make plenty of money.
JT, final word on this question?
I think that that's a novel idea, but to the point here, John's not doing it right now.
I can't. JT, I can't fly either because I don't have wings.
We're going to keep moving.
If I had wings, I'd fly.
Next question is from Susan Raines.
I can't do what I can't do.
Susan Raines is a Democrat with the Tampa Tiger Bay Club, and she says a 2019 Congressional Budget Office study determined that increasing the federal minimum wage by 2025 would have 2 major impacts. The first would be earnings would increase for many, which would lift some families out of poverty. And secondly, other workers would become jobless. Their family income would drop, and it could place them below the poverty threshold. What are your thoughts on this, and do you think it would occur if the minimum wage is raised? Why or why not? John, would you start with this one, please?
If what will occur?
Those two points. The first one is earnings would increase for many, which would lift some families out of poverty, and other workers would become jobless. Their family income would drop, and it could place them below the poverty threshold. So some win, some lose.
I don't know why anybody would be jobless. I can promise you this.
Automation, other things that would happen.
All right, well, listen, automation is going to come no matter what. You know why? It just is. If JT can figure out a way to get a robot to fry his fish, there's going to be a robot to fry the fish. When the tractor was invented, they thought that was the end of the world. That was called automation. Tractor. When the ATM machine came, everybody, oh my God, we don't have tellers anymore. We still have tellers. Automation is coming regardless. And nobody's going to lose their job because of this, because here's the thing that I know for a fact by looking at JT. JT is not going to fire the dishwasher who's back there doing the sorriest job in the world. If you've ever washed dishes, I have. It's terrible. They got to have that guy, because guess who's not washing the dishes? JT's not going to wash the dishes. Those employees are never leaving because JT and guys like JT are never going to wash the dishes. They're never going to fry the fish. They're never going to mop the floors. So when people say we're going to have to get rid of employees, who's going to cook? Who's going to clean? Who's going to wash the dishes? It's a bogus, fraudulent argument made by people who want to keep people down with slave wages.
JT, how about the dishes?
I've done plenty of dishes. My first job actually was as a dishwasher, and I got an interesting story about that because, my dad, he was a jockey, and he came here from Panama. He wanted to ride horses in New York. So he got a job at a restaurant while he was trying to break in. He did dishes, and he always told me this story. He's like, I went there, and I got there, and I started working real fast. And the guys, they were like, no, slow down. We don't do it that way. And my dad said, look, if I can't be the best at what I'm doing here today, I'm not going to be the professionals out there on the track. And that resonated with me. And I got my first job as a dishwasher at Reddington Beach at Sweet Sage Cafe when I was 15 years old. And at the time, because they didn't serve alcohol, I could serve tables when I was 16. But I knew that I needed to prove that I was capable of doing dishes. So when the opportunity came, that I would be able to do it. And it happened that way. And, natural progression, here I am. I've served and bartended, and I'm, on a Zoom call with John Morgan here. So I can tell you that I've washed plenty of dishes in my day, and I still would. You can ask any of our employees. I'll jump in anywhere, wherever it's needed. That's the part of being in this business, and it's a family business, and we treat everybody like family.
But you're not going to fire the dishwashers.
And to the other point about automation, there's two different groups in the business. There's the back of the house and there's the front of the house. This affects more than anybody else the front of the house employees. This is a 100% increase on that. And you know what? The bartenders and the servers, they don't want it. They do not want to become hourly employees. They do not want to be treated like this is Seattle or Portland. And I can tell you that because I lived in Portland for 4 years. They put service fees on top of the bills, or they factor it into the price of the check, and they do away with gratuity altogether. Servers and bartenders do not want it. And I can tell you, we have a very powerful system that we just implemented at one of our other locations, and it's called Toast. You can do the research if you want. It allows us to have a contactless experience. A customer can come in with 5 people, scan a QR code, order everything right off of their phone. So I can take 10 servers and cut it down to 2 if I wanted to, but the customer does not want that. We do not want to be forced to have to go down that route. We enjoy our person-to-person relationships with our customers. We've been here for 38 years. There's people who have brought multi-generations in this business.
Thank you, JT.
Anyway.
Well, I just have to say that JT is kind of being a little bit, listen, if they can make more money punching that button that JT's talking about, they're going to punch that button. Don't let him kid you for 1 single minute. You sell more with servers at the table, upselling. And by the way, JT, when those servers get to $15 an hour, they can still get tips. By the way, it's not illegal to give a bigger tip than 15%. You can still get big tips, but finally getting a guarantee. Think of how many, since you've been in this business, JT, you have to rely on some customer who comes in who's a cheapskate, who doesn't give you a tip after you worked your butt off. No, that shouldn't be. We should build the tip.
We're going to keep moving.
To the check. Okay.
The servers and the bartenders don't want it, John.
Yeah, we're going to keep
Not
moving.
the ones that work for me. They want it.
Okay.
Our next question is from Missy Martin, a Democrat. She from Tampa Tiger Bay Club. She says the fiscal impact to city, county, and state budgets, if this amendment passes, is estimated to be over $700 million from 2022 to 2027. What is the fiscal impact to small and large businesses? Are there estimated job cuts from higher wages? Will it result in lower tax revenue to city, county, and state budgets? That's a lot of questions, but if you can try and unravel those. John, would you start with this one?
Well, it's going to eliminate all the tax burden the taxpayers are paying to keep people sitting at home and not working, because it's better not to work. That whatever that number you gave out, or wherever she pulled that from, it pales in comparison to what we're spending to pay people not to work. And when they're not working, they're teaching their children not to work. And then there's a vicious cycle. So the trade-off is going to be the tax savings. Do you know why we have city buses? Because people can't afford a car. Tell me anybody that wants to ride a bus. People ride buses because they can't afford a car. Buses are subsidized by taxpayers. That's just one little ripple from this income inequality, where the taxpayers are paying the burden on keeping people at home and not working, because it's better not to work than to work. That is ass backwards for me. The other thing that I will tell that viewer is this. JT, you're going to make more money, and I'll tell you how. When you have a happier worker, when you don't have turnover, when you have people who stay longer and know their job, your business is going to thrive, because that happy worker, that more productive worker, is going to make you more money. And I've seen it everywhere where I can control my wages.
Thank you. JT.
I have to agree to John Morgan's point on the wage part of this and happy employees. Our back of the house employees already make 40 to 50% above the minimum wage. And it could end up being $15 by 2026. But if we've had conversations with them, and in their position, they've earned that. You know, they put in the time, they've acquired the skills, and the market dictates the wage, and we're willing to pay good for good work. You know, but the problem for those folks is once the price of everything goes up, and somebody walking in the door day one can make the same amount that they do, but yet everything around them costs more, they actually got a pay cut. They're technically making less than they were before this amendment were to pass. Right. So now their purchasing power is down. And to John Morgan's point about tax savings, I think it's important for the viewers, if you haven't voted already, when you do get your ballot, you'll see on Amendment 2, and I'd just like to take a moment to read the language here. This proposed constitutional amendment is estimated to have a net impact on the state budget. This impact may result in higher taxes or a loss of government services in order to maintain a state budget as required by the Constitution. So is it good for the taxpayers? I would say it isn't.
Let me tell you who it's good for. Disney World ticket, $7.50, 1980, $150 30 years later. Minimum wage, $3.50, 1980, $7.50. Prices have gone through the roof, JT. But guess what? At Disney, Bob Iger, the chairman, who didn't start the company, a guy named Walt Disney did. Bob Iger's a billionaire. He's a billionaire. You know why those ticket prices went up? To make Bob Iger a billionaire. And if you want to Google, read the story about the people who work at Disney and live in their cars with their children in Orlando. So all of this makes no sense. The reason prices go up is so the rich get richer, and these CEOs who didn't start this business themselves can become literally billionaires on the back of the people who built their business.
JT, you obviously aren't Disney. Do you want the final word on this?
You took the words right out of my mouth. Thank you.
That sounds like a song.
All right. Our next question is from John Godwin, a Democrat with Tampa Tiger Bay Club. A Florida minimum wage worker earns less than $18,000 a year. At this salary, they're also likely receiving welfare and SNAP support from the government. Does this setup not mean that taxpayers and the government are subsidizing some of the state's largest companies by making up for the lack of income those companies pay their workers? It's exactly what we're talking about. Great timeliness on this message. JT, would you start with this one?
You know, I'm not a paid economist. I'm not somebody who's directly in politics. I'm not a litigator like John Morgan. I'm a restaurateur. I'm a business owner, and I can only come from you from that perspective. And I can just tell you from our experiences and the things that we do every day to try to stay afloat, in particular in this very difficult time that we're in, is we just try to take care of our people. We treat them like family. You know, we've had people that have been with us for over 30 years. They've put kids through college. They've paid a mortgage. So I can only speak to you from that position. And I could just tell you that this amendment, we can talk about macroeconomics of the state, but on a micro level in our building, this is just going to have tremendous impacts. And it could end up being somebody else that would once called this place a place of employment that the government's going to have to pick up. And that's not something that we want to have.
Thank you. John.
Well, I'm glad JT pointed out something important, which was by the year 2026, he thinks everybody at his restaurant's going to be making $15 an hour anyway. So this won't even affect your restaurant, JT. But to the point, oh, and by the way, last night in that debate that Trump and Biden were in, both of them, Biden's for a $15 an hour wage. And did you hear what Trump was for? A $15 an hour minimum wage for federal workers. But to that viewer's question, what this is corporate welfare to pay those subsidies so that other companies don't pay their employees what they do. We taxpayers are paying these subsidies and these benefits, these government benefits, because the people can't work it. In Orlando, there's a food bank called the Morgan & Morgan Hunger Relief Center at Second Harvest. We feed hundreds of thousands of families a week before the pandemic, and now it's off the chart. people are working like crazy, driving across town to the Morgan Food Bank and begging for free food, and then getting government assistance, which is corporate welfare for the big restaurants who don't want to pay their club. It's so perverse that I can't begin to explain it.
Thank you. JT, any final comments on this one?
I think maybe some of my colleagues wouldn't approve of this, but I'd like to say, John, thank you for your taking care of your community. I think that's a wonderful thing that you do.
Thank you.
Agreed. Our next question is from Greg Davis, a Republican from Flagler Tiger Bay Club. And Greg asks, businesses tend to respond to labor and other cost increases by doing more with less and by automating. What studies have been done on this, and what are the key results and impacts on labor and employment if this amendment is adopted? JT, would you start for us?
Well, I was reviewing the Congressional Budget Office's report, and they did a good report on Seattle, and they said that for every individual that is lifted out of poverty, 3 people will lose their employment. And they also, in that same report, they said that people made more money as far as an hourly pay goes, but they actually made $200 less a month after their wages increases went up, just because they lost hours. So what you've done in that case is you've raised the bottom of what the cost of living is, and you've actually taken money out of the pockets of people who actually needed it. And one of the things that when I think about that, I think about Target in particular. Back in 2017, they were applauded by labor unions because they said that they would go up to $15 an hour in 2020. At the time, people were praising them. You know who's not praising them now are the people who used to work for them, or the people who were part-time that were once full-time. So even if you're looking at big businesses, like, I think that this is just a way for companies to come out and be like they're doing something good, but really at the back end, it's been detrimental. Same consequence for them. They said that they now make $200 less on their paycheck. And what you see if you go to Target or you go to Walmart or any of these companies that have been outward about raising that minimum wage is you see aisles of where people work, and then aisles of where the people used to work that are now replaced by automation and technology. So I think that we see it just in our everyday lives, how these big businesses have managed to enhance their e-commerce, enhance their automation, and then cut people down to part-time by pawning it off as a wolf in sheep's clothing as a $15 minimum wage.
Thank you. John?
Well, I think JT would agree with me on at least this. Automation's coming no matter what. If somebody thinks they can get it done cheaper with automation than people, they're going to do it. They did it with the tractor. They're doing it with driverless trucks. Right now, look at these driverless trucks. There's 4 million truck drivers. They've got driverless trucks that are going to be here soon. Has nothing to do with the minimum wage. Nothing to do with the minimum wage. And listen, what's happening is these people, and by the way, I don't know, Walmart is hiring, Target is hiring, Amazon is hiring. I don't know when you tell me Target's not hiring, they're hiring like crazy. When you're starting to look at WonderWorks, look at Target, they're hiring like crazy. But here's what's also happening. These people who are working 40 hours, then they got to go work another 20 or 30 somewhere else to cobble enough to pay for their family. And then they don't ever get to be with their family because all they do is work and sleep. And you only get one chance in life. You only get a few picnics and a few days at the beach. And when you're working 7 days and sleeping when you're not working, that's not living, that's existing, and that's subhuman, and that's not right.
Yeah. JT?
I empathize with the concept of that. And again, I can't speak for things on a macro level, but I can tell you that within our business, just because of my own experiences and my own upcoming through this business and how I've gone through college and gotten to where I am today, I've managed these restaurants, and I will speak to the dishwasher on day one and say, listen, there's opportunity within this business. If you want to become a cook and make more money, I want you to be able to have the opportunity to do that. If you want to manage this restaurant and earn a living and be on a salary, I want you to be able to do that. And even if you don't want to be a restaurateur for the rest of your life, I want you to be able to acquire the skills that are going to take you into the next opportunity so you're able to grow. It's about building people. And our restaurants and our places of business give us the opportunity to do that and give people an opportunity to earn a better living for themselves and their family.
And JT, I may be telling Noah about the flood here when I'm talking to you, because you're going to have a $15 an hour minimum wage by 2026. So you're not really who I'm talking to. I'm talking to the other operators not like you. I'm talking to the other people who are not as friendly to their employees as you. I'm trying to have something uniform across the state of Florida in a very gradual way. And remember this, the pandemic came up. What did we learn in this pandemic? We learned what an essential worker was. And you know what an essential worker was? It was somebody making BS money, doing the jobs nobody else wants to do, standing at the counter, collecting money when people are spewing at them, mopping floors in hospitals, making beds in hotels. The essential worker, who were the heroes of the pandemic. And they're usually people of color and women.
We're going to keep
heroes.
moving. We're going to
The
keep
heroes.
moving. That clock
The
keeps
ones we're trying to do
ticking.
this for.
Thank you for understanding there.
All
Our
right.
next question is from Nancy Epps, an MPA from Volusia Tiger Bay Club. Nancy says, since an increase in the minimum wage would also raise the salaries of many others in order to avoid compression, the prices of many goods and services are likely to rise significantly, and the federal COLA increase will not take into account individual states' wages. How do you propose to explain to our large senior population who live on a fixed income that their money will buy fewer goods and services? John, how would you answer that?
Same way I have about Walt Disney World. I can go down the list. We can take goods from 20 years ago or 30 years ago. Prices, inflation has gone through the roof, Nancy Epps. I know Nancy Epps has gone through the roof. And there has been no minimum wage increase of any substance. So that's a fraudulent argument. And you know what's sad about that argument? That argument is playing to the most selfish base of people's emotion. It's all about me. It's all about me. It's not all about you. It's all about us. It's about taking care of each other. It's about lifting each other up. That's what we're taught in church. That's what we're taught in synagogue. That's what we're taught at the temple. That's what we're taught at the mosque. To do for those who have the least, do the most for them. This is not a political vote. This is a vote of morality and compassion. And so the person who says, oh, I might have to pay 50 cents more for JT's delicious hush puppies, I'll pay 50 cents more for those hush puppies, JT, if that's going to do something good for the overall good of our state.
JT.
Well, I'd like to point out that John Morgan didn't really address the seniors here very much in his answer.
Yeah, I did. I said, listen, prices have gone up anyway. I did address it.
Here in this
JT,
state,
go ahead.
one of the things that concern me most about the senior population here in this state is they make up about 20% of the residents. They're not in the working force anymore. And when you're talking about a 77% increase to the minimum wage, prices are going to go up tremendously. These people are living on fixed incomes. They've chosen Florida to come and retire and live out the rest of their golden years. They're not going to be getting a raise. What happens when they're in the retirement communities that they're living in, that they're paying to live in, on the budgets that they have to pass off the cost of the people working in their cafeterias, the nurses that are in those buildings? They're going to have to pass it off to these seniors. And these seniors, A, are not going to have enough money to pay to live where they live now, and B, they're not going to have expendable income to go and spend at any of these other businesses here in this state. They make up a huge portion of our economic success here, and it is irresponsible to them more than any other category because they are not going to be able to make up the difference.
You see, what JT's doing is what the Chamber of Commerce trains you to do. Play on the fears of people's selfishness. What do you say to those seniors, JT? about the Disney tickets. Why'd those tickets go up so high?
Again, I can't speak to Disney, John.
Well, tell me what you think. You got all sorts of congressional budgets, and you got all your research you're looking at. Why did the Disney price go from $750 in 80 to $150 30 years later? Can any of the seniors go to Disney? Because let me tell you something. When I go to Disney, I see a bunch of seniors at Disney. $150 a ticket.
JT, any final word on this one?
I would say, John, email the CEO and copy me on it because I'd like to hear the answer too.
To who?
Email the CEO of Disney and copy me on it because I want to hear what he has to say too.
Exactly.
Put me on that email, John.
Yeah.
I'll report back. We're going to move on. Our next question is from Lee Lowry, a Republican with the Tampa Tiger Bay Club. Lee asks, is pay of $15 an hour really adequate to lift, for example, a single mom with 2 kids out of poverty? What else could and should be done to lift people out of poverty, including and beyond what is possible through legislation? John, do you want to start with this one?
$15 an hour is, quite frankly, not adequate when you think about it. And it doesn't happen until 2026. And, I guess I'm a senior, JT. I'll be 70 years old or dead when it gets to $15 an hour.
I hope not, John.
I hope not too. I drink a lot of Maker's Mark, and that kind of helps my whole equilibrium. But that is a very good question. And $15 an hour is even not enough. JT, how would your family survive on you making $15 an hour? I don't think very well.
I started at a low wage job and I worked my way up because I knew that I needed the opportunities to do it.
Well, so did I. Listen, I washed dishes.
Mm-hmm.
I was Pluto at Walt Disney World. And I was probably the greatest Pluto in the history of Walt Disney World. And I didn't make squat doing it. And the tickets were low. And now the tickets are real high, but the Pluto's still not making nothing.
I love the point about the Pluto thing, because again, back in my research about WonderWorks, you said that it was the greatest job in the history of mankind. And I learned a lot about theme parks. So you would be able to say that the experience was better than the paycheck. And now you're a guy that owns attraction businesses and you're worth a tremendous amount of money. And you've achieved the American dream. And you started off washing dishes, frying burgers at Dairy Queen, which is admirable. And so you've done a great job, but you did it by getting an opportunity to gain experience to get to where you are today.
No question about it. And by the way, I think we're agreeing with it. We may be totally in agreement by the time this is over. You're already going to raise your minimum wage to $15 an hour by 2026. And we agree that the Florida legislature should have done this. This is a job for the Florida legislature. But they're not going to do it because these folks are owned wholly by the Florida Chamber of Commerce, who believes that keeping people down with slave-like wages makes more money. Bob Iger is a billionaire, and he did not start Walt Disney World. Tell me that's wrong.
This has come down to the battle of the dishwashers, it seems.
I did. Where'd you dishwash? I was at Ireland's, and I'll tell you what. It smelled like vomit in that damn dishwasher room. It's one of the worst jobs I've ever had in my life. And it was 24 hours, and I was there from 11 at night until 7 in the morning. It might have been the worst job of my life washing dishes. That's why I know you're not going to go back and wash dishes again, JT.
I love washing dishes. It's thoughtless work. It's therapeutic for me, to be honest.
Yeah.
I washed dishes at WonderWorks one night.
Okay.
I'm going to close out with a couple of questions. You both have talked about some things that I'd like some clarity on for our viewers. One is cost of goods and how this would affect, and John, you I don't know if you say that it should affect or shouldn't affect, JT, the realities of what it would look like at your business. Can you both talk to some specifics around that of how it would or wouldn't affect businesses and some real dollars and cents things? I'm sure that both of your sides have put a pencil to the paper and looked at this. So can you tell us what this means in reality for the businesses that we're talking about? JT, would you start?
Sure. Any of these vendors that we currently buy from now, they're going to have to do something to offset this cost as well. So what we buy at a wholesale price is going to be higher than what we were buying before. And then we're going to have to, again, pass that cost off to offset the additional increases. But when you look at the whole pie chart of what a business is able to do and the margins you need to make, it kind of goes back to my original point about this. We're already operating on very slim margins. So you can offset the cost of purchasing goods by passing it off to the consumer, which is going to raise the prices for everybody, or you have to change the way you do business. And it's going to be a different experience for our customers, and that's not at all what we want. So I can tell you with 100% certainty that prices are going to go up. And if they're not going to go up, somebody is going to lose hours or lose their job, which is what I don't believe this amendment was intended to do.
Thank you. John.
Well, first of all, I don't know why you're working on such slim margins. I'm making a lot of money at my restaurants and attractions. I need to come over there and sit down with the management team and show you all how to make money. But one thing that we do know is that people will pay if they have to pay. During this pandemic, what do you pay Uber Eats to come pick up your fish, JT? Is that $3? People are paying $3 to have Uber Eats pull up to their house. What about that? Isn't that horrible? $3, my God, just to deliver the food. $3. That's already been added. And guess what? Through the pandemic, through the most critical time of our life, worse than Pearl Harbor, worse than 2008, Uber Eats and DoorDash and all these companies are making a fortune. And who's paying it? The seniors that JT's worried about, because they want to get their food from Chili's and they'll pay for it. People don't have a problem paying a little bit more for service and for people.
Thank you. I've got one more question. If we could limit the answers on this in the consideration of time to 1 minute. I've heard you both talk about the impacts, and it feels like we're talking apples to oranges a little bit. John, you've mentioned Walt Disney World several times, which is a large business. JT, I think in my research, the concerns are for the small business. Can we somehow meet in the middle and reconcile this of the impacts to both sides of that? I think that we haven't found that common language here, and I'm concerned that our viewers still might be left with a concern or question in their mind of who are we talking about and what are the actual impacts to them. John, would you start?
Yeah, I think that I was concerned about the small business most of all, and that's why it is gradually phased in over years. 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. JT, I think by not answering the $10 an hour question, I think he agrees that $10 an hour would be fair. He's told us he's going to pay $15 by 2026. So he and we agree on everything today. And that gradual time will give the small businesses the time to adapt, get ready, get past the pandemic. If we're not past the pandemic in 2026, we got problems that none of us can solve.
Thank you. JT, help us understand the small business versus large business impacts.
The gradualness of the wage is a gradualness of margin, slimming of the margin. So over that time, no matter how long you space it out, things will have to change. People will lose hours, people will lose jobs, or prices will go up, or a combination of both. It's inevitable. So this idea of a gradual increase, it doesn't hold any water here, okay? So I'd like to deviate from the idea that somehow that makes this any easier to absorb and continue to do business as you do. But I do think that there is a difference between a small, a medium, and a large scale business. And there are also the differences between where a business is located in the state. To John's credit, we are here having this debate. It is on the amendment. It's a hot button item. And I think that it has legs for future conversation. And I'd be happy to sit on the other side of the table of him and represent the restaurant industry and how we can phase something in that makes more sense than a constitutional amendment.
They won't do it in Tallahassee. There's no conversation in Tallahassee. They don't want it. They take their orders from the chamber. We'll never have that opportunity.
Thank you. We're going to let that be the last word again. I want to thank you to our guests who spent this time with us to answer the tough questions from Tiger Bay Club members. It's been a pleasure to hear from JT Corrales of Amendment 2 Hurts You and John Morgan representing Florida for a Fair Wage. You are both passionate advocates for your position and all you represent in this debate around Amendment 2. We're eager to see the outcome of this decision by Florida voters and wish you the best in the last days before the election. To our viewers, thank you for joining us, and please be sure to share our event with others who can benefit from this discussion as they make their final ballot decisions. Please, above all else, make your voice heard and vote. We look forward to seeing you on Thursday, November 12th for our election wrap-up program. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for the Florida Tiger Bay Club's Election Series 2020. This series is brought to you by a partnership of the Tiger Bay Clubs across the state of Florida. Partnering clubs include Central Florida, First Coast, Flagler, Gold Coast, Manatee, St. John's, South County and Venice, Suncoast, Tampa, and Volusia County. We hope our Florida Tiger Bay Club's Election Series 2020 helps you be a more informed and engaged voter this election cycle.